OK, prepare for a culture shock doc. Now, in a programme that airs next week, Muslim political commentator Mo Ansar, who called for the English Defence League to be banned, is filmed over an 18-month period as he spends time getting to know the leader of the EDL, Tommy Robinson.
Well, Mo and Tommy were brought together by Nikki Campbell last April, and Nikki takes up the story from here.
Tommy Robinson was the founder and leader of the English Defence League, always in the forefront of their controversial street protests.
I don't care whether you sound racist. I don't care what you say to me. I don't care if you want to kill me.
In April 2012, when Tommy Robinson was still the leader of the English Defence League, he took part in a debate about far-right extremism on my BBC programme, The Big Questions.
You can't call everyone who opposes anything to do with Islam far right. It's not right.
You are trying to become now a soft face which is appeasing hatred against Muslims and Islamophobia.
Then Mo Ansar, the man who had tried to get the EDL banned, issued a surprising invitation.
Tommy, if you and your family ever want to come to meet my family for dinner, you are more than welcome.
This unexpected gesture of friendship was the start of something for both Tommy and Mo.
I had in my mind that if the opportunity came up, that I'd want to try and reach out to him somehow.
He doesn't seem to have an answer to a lot of the issues, but at the same time, I warm to him when I meet him.
Mo asked Tommy for a chance to talk to EDL members directly. No Muslim had ever asked to address them before. Tommy set up a meeting in Luton, where it all began. But he issued Mo with a warning.
I want you to realise when you meet them that these people don't hate you, that they are ordinary people who have concerns and fears about what's happening to their country.
I'm happy to come here tonight. I think the most important thing is to open up a dialogue.
This is Mohammed Ansar, everybody. Say hello.
Hello. As somebody who was born in this country and is British, I think I uphold British values. I'm also a Muslim. Islam is not here to take over the country. Islam is not here to take over the world. That is not the Islam that I know. The Islam that I know is one that lives in coexistence, that one that honours and respects British virtues and values.
Does anyone recognise the Islam that Mo's talking about? No.
Okay.
Here's the problem.
If we think that when one Muslim does something wrong, that reflects on all the community, Muslims are not one tribe. They are not one group of people who think the same. They think differently, they act differently.
So you can't defend Islam then?
Well, Islam and Muslims are two different...
You can defend your Islam, but nobody else's.
The meeting adjourned to allow Mo to pray. Mo was pleased. It felt like a good first step. Not all the audience agreed with him, but he was relieved they had listened to each other.
They were very passionate, they had some very strongly held views, and I think it's the kind of thing which we need to do more and more, because that conversation could have gone on for weeks.
I think that went good. I hope it's changed Mo's perception. I hope it showed Mo that people have got concerns.
In August, Tommy agreed to visit the Aisha Mosque in Walsall with Mo. It was the first time he'd ever entered a mosque, and to some of his EDL followers, this would have been unthinkable. Tommy, too, still had serious misgivings.
I think a mosque is a command and control centre. I think the last thing they do in there is pray. I don't want any more mosques built because I believe we're adding to the problem. When Islam integrates and assimilates in the same way every other ideology and religion has, then they can build more mosques.
We'll take our shoes off here, and we'll put them on here, and then we'll go through.
No problem.
All right.
Mo took Tommy upstairs to watch the afternoon prayers, while most of the men below were completely unaware the leader of the English Defence League was in their midst. Tommy thinks it's wrong that women have to pray in a separate area, behind the men.
But you couldn't concentrate, and I couldn't concentrate if we had to pray behind a woman. Could you concentrate?
Depends what she looks like.
Well, exactly. No, but genuinely, could you concentrate behind a woman?
I get that.
Right.
On this visit, Mo took Tommy to meet with Sheikh Ibrahim Mogra, one of Britain's leading Muslim scholars.
Every mosque I look at, I can go on and I can find a homophobic, anti-Semitic preacher who will come into this country and give a sermon.
And they should be stopped. Be a good Muslim, I first have to be a good human being before anything. I disagree with a lot of your views, but I respect you as a human being. But I cannot harm you. I'm not allowed. It's forbidden.
Well, I wish everyone felt like that, because all I get is death threats. People want to smash my face in.
No, Tommy, I'll tell you.
Murder my kids, murder my wife.
Please don't measure Islam by the behaviour of some.
We just have to look at it realistically. The Muslims are not going to leave Britain, they're here. So we have to make the best of the situation. And the best of the situation is finding the really good ones and the really moderate ones and pushing them to the forefront and making sure that they're the ones that are heard.
An absolutely fascinating film, and Mo is actually with us now in the studio. Welcome, Mo. Nice to see you. So why initially then did you invite Tommy Robinson into your world? And in hindsight, having filmed with him for 18 months, do you have any regrets?
I think, firstly, Muslims all over the country have been really worried and concerned about the rising tensions, the increase in anti-Muslim prejudice and anti-Muslim attacks. And I kind of thought, well, you've got to start somewhere, haven't you? Yeah. And before going on the programme, on the big questions, I did ask a higher authority for advice, so I checked with my wife first, and I said to my missus, I said to my missus, look, if I get the opportunity,
you're going to invite
I'll invite him to dinner. Is that all right with you? And she thought, well, I've got permission, so it was fine.
Yeah. I mean, it did seem there in the cut-down version that we saw there that he was open to dialogue. I mean, did you find that he was different on camera than he was, you know, when the cameras were turned off, or was it...
I think at the start of the journey, when the camera was lifted, I think Tommy in particular, he's somebody who's used to that kind of raucous situation. Yeah. You know, he does put up a lot of front, he does put up a lot of bravado. And I think as time went on and we got to know each other, and as the cameras were lifted or put aside, we were beginning to have more and more open dialogue. And I think if you want to pursue peace, whether it's rhetorical weapons or whether it's physical arms, you've got to put them down and come around the table and have a conversation with somebody.
And you were saying, just before we came to the end of the film, there were lots of parts of Tommy that you did actually learn to love by the end of the documentary.
Look, there were two particular occasions. We were sat on the big questions opposite each other, going kind of hammering songs at each other, and Twitter picked up on the fact that we both cracked up a little bit. There was a moment where we just looked at each other, and it was like being kids at the back of the classroom, and you start giggling. You don't know why, and it is the weirdest thing ever. And there was another time on the back streets of the Newcastle EDL rally, after some recent events, and tensions were running high. And, of course, we were having a really heated debate, and Tommy, he's a bit of a cheeky chappy, so at the end of it, he puts his arm around me. Now, as somebody who stands up against fascism and hate and prejudice, I really didn't like it. I tried to style it out, I tried to laugh it off. It's not easy, it's not easy. But as a person of faith, you kind of accept it and you go with it.
Yeah. And from an EDL perspective, I mean, it took a real dramatic ending, didn't it, the whole tale?
Yeah, I mean, we've spent 18 months on this journey together, and we've listened to both sides of the argument. He's met a lot of Muslims, I've met members of the EDL, and at the end of it, you know, I suppose it is very dramatic, the idea that Tommy resigned from the EDL and he left. And that was quite a shock to a lot of people, I think, across the country. But I think having been on the journey with him, I began to see him softening on some of his views. Maybe not all of his views, but enough.
And some of his views you agree with. I mean, he said you can't call everyone who opposes anything to do with Islam the far right, and that's something that you agree with.
And how could you not agree with that? That for Tommy, that is a relatively reasonable statement.
Yeah.
I think the bit when people are perhaps saying, look, we don't want you in our country, or giving Nazi salutes, or saying we don't want any more mosques, or maybe you're not British. I mean, you know, I'm born here, I'm raised here, my grandfather fought in World War II, lost two of his brothers. I feel like I have a right to express my faith in this country. And for somebody to say you're not part of Britain or British culture, I think I find that difficult to contend with.
But, I mean, you yourself, you've criticised other Muslim voices, haven't you?
I have. I mean, there's an intolerant strain, I think, within all cultures and all communities. You can be white Catholic, you can be, you know, Asian Muslim, you can be African Hindu, you know, you could be whatever background you come from. There are extreme voices out there, and I think it's really important at this time that people who have got, I think, sensible voices around moderation, a very British way of doing things, about talking through your problems and actually not going to the extremes of situation, I think you do have to speak up. And I think when people oppose equality, or are homophobic, or are racist, or are sexist in any way, I think it's important that people do find their voice and speak up.
Yeah.
Is this an area, Ed, that you would always avoid as a comedian?
No, religion particularly is a big thing comedians like to talk about, I have to say. I'm an atheist personally, but I was raised Christian, so when I do jokes about religion, it's generally, I do a lot of stuff making fun of Christianity, because that's where I'm from. I'm sorry. That's but I've also... Oh, no, I'd be inclusive.
It's fine.
I've also... Because the thing is, if you have a pop of Christianity, the main thing people always respond with, oh, you wouldn't say that about the Muslims, would you? But I've also, when I've had a pop at religion, I've also had a little go at Hindus and Muslims there. I'm all inclusive when it comes to making fun of religion. Religion's a very easy thing to make fun of because if you apply a serious logic to it, it's a very difficult thing to, for it to stand up. So it's an easy thing to have a pop at, it has to be said.
And more than the overall conclusion of this documentary then? The whole thing you've been on, what you've experienced over the last 18 months?
Slightly cynical, but cautiously optimistic. I think the most important thing is when you have differences, when there are tensions, when there are difficulties, the only way is dialogue. You don't tackle hate with more hate. I think that's got to be the way forward.
It's a lesson for all of us, I think.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Thank you very much.